Stay away from Tauerpin Road, Part 1, written by Random Appalachian 468. To be honest, I'm not sure if writing this is a good idea. It's been close to 4 months since everything happened, and at times it still feels like a bad dream, one I need to shake off and forget. But I know that if I don't at least try to tell the truth now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life, however short it may be. I can't fit the full account into one cohesive segment, thanks to the word limits of this site, so I'll just have to try and get it all out there one day at a time. I doubt anyone will believe me, but I'm used to that by now. It all started last October, when I still worked as a tour guide for the new Wilderness Wildlife Reserve. I'd stayed late to help clean up in the kitchens, after volunteering to work concessions in place of a girl who came down with the flu. With the last of the guests gone for the night, I stood at the big industrial-grade sink and wiped the last of the dishes dry, before lugging the stack of clean plates, bowls, and cups toward their rightful places on the stainless steel shelves. Both of my feet hurt from standing on them all day, and a small knot had formed in the small of my back. But still, I smiled. Never thought I'd be happy to scrub salad bowls. My second year at New Wilderness had been amazing, and I couldn't wait to come back next season. Everything about the little park was perfect, from the adorable animals, friendly co-workers, and surprisingly healthy food to the picturesque rural Ohio landscape. Since my first interview in the year prior, I'd done some tours on the regular safari buses, as well as odd jobs around the facility, without discovering a single thing that made me want to quit. Even kitchen duty at the Hilltop Cafe turned out to be way more fun than I'd expected. I'd learned to bake bread from scratch, and Cassandra, my 40-year-old supervisor who knew every knife, pot, and pan like the back of her hand, praised my culinary talent to the skies. "See you later, Maddie," Cassandra shouted over the stove exhaust fans with her usual happy-go-lucky cheer as I walked out the door to the parking lot. "Good job today. You were a big help." "Thanks. Have a good night, Cassandra." I chirped back and let myself give out a contented sigh. I love my job. A cool breeze brushed past my face. It promised to be a beautiful fall night, the wind blowing in from the west, the stars twinkling into view as the last of the sunlight faded, and a crescent moon beamed down from above. Few cars were left atop the ridge where the visitor center stood. My own little blue sedan, its paint chipped and peeling, waited for me, and I silently hoped it would start. Dad had been having issues with its starter, but it hadn't acted up in a few days. Here's to hoping that record holds. I unlocked my car door to climb in and caught sight of a familiar black SUV pulling up the hill. The words, "Park Ranger," stickered to the side. My pulse jumped, the smile on my face melted into a grimace, and a twinge of nervousness knifed through my chest. It could be Randy, I told myself, or Daniel, or Phyllis, any of the other night guards. It didn't have to be him, just because I was here. The SUV rolled through the parking lot, and the driver spotted me, his casual grin unmistakable. Oh no. Hot embarrassment flooded through my cheeks at the lanky silhouette who put the SUV in park and climbed out to saunter over to me. The night had been going so well, and it didn't have to end like this. After all, he wasn't within voice range yet. If I wanted to, I could pretend not to see him, jump into my car, hide my face, and floor it for home. He wouldn't know for sure that I didn't have somewhere important to be, and I could avoid the awkward conversation, maybe even put it off for another 5-month winter season. Yet, despite my brain begging me to leave, I stayed, and put on what I hoped to be a friendly smile to hide my anxiety. From 4 feet away, Mark hooked his thumbs into his jacket pockets and rested one hip against my car's front fender. "Hey, stranger. Long time no see. How have you been?" Mark Petrick and I had met during my first year at the Reserve's Carnivore Cove in between breaks on our tour bus routes. He was nice, smart, yet easy to talk to, and he never seemed uninterested in anything I had to say. As it turned out, it was his first year too, and like me, he had already fallen in love with New Wilderness. Despite being surrounded by strangers, Mark went out of his way to include people into the conversation who wouldn't have stood a chance on their own, told self-deprecating jokes to draw fire away from anyone who felt singled out, and in general played the part of a peacekeeper between difficult personalities when tensions flared. He always acted with unfailing kindness toward me, and I considered him to be a good friend. We exchanged contact information, and I enjoyed having someone to chat with in between sessions of Skyrim in my after-work hours. Then 3 months later, Mark texted me and asked me to dinner. To be honest, I'd seen it coming, could tell by how often he'd messaged me, how happy he was whenever I responded. A few other guys at previous jobs had also shown interest in me, and while Mark was definitely better mannered than them, it was still obvious. I knew it was a scenario that other girls at New Wilderness would have welcomed with glee, but for me, a knot formed in my gut the moment I saw his dinner invitation pop up on my phone. I had sat on my bed, put my head in my hands, and fought waves of nausea, because in that moment, I knew that I didn't have feelings for him, not the slightest romantic spark. Mark was my friend, one I really enjoyed spending time with, and I didn't want to lose our friendship, but I couldn't leave that text unanswered forever. So I did what I knew was right. I let him down as easy as I possibly could. Mark took it really well, said he still wanted to stay friends, and we even talked some more after, though eventually the conversations died out due to my lack of enthusiastic replies. Though relieved to have it over with, I felt awful for weeks afterward, knowing that my rejection had hurt him deeply. He was a great guy, but I just couldn't bear the thought of going out with Mark, only to have to dump him later when I still didn't feel any different, and see that pain etch itself over his face. Perhaps that's why, when Mark announced his engagement to another girl at the beginning of this year, a little of the guilt lifted from my shoulders. He'd been a bundle of giddy smiles when I'd overheard him talking to one of the other tour guides about his fiancée, and I wanted to be happy for him. I wanted to anyway. I'm fine. I bobbed my head like a doll on an old truck dashboard, wishing I could dig the shame from my chest like an unwanted parasite and stomp it on the ground. You? Mark's cocoa brown eyes seemed to see right through my nervous facade, and he made an apologetic half smile. I'm good. You in a hurry? I don't want to keep you. Those last few words stung more than I expected them to, and I almost winced. Part of the reason I couldn't be relieved, happy, or calm around Mark Petrick was because even though I still thought of him as nothing more than a friend, deep inside my selfish heart, I'd felt sick the moment he said the word engaged. One of my big goals was to find the love of my life, settle down with him, and have lots of kids in a nice cottage in the countryside. I'd confessed as much during our early conversations before Mark revealed his feelings for me. While him moving on was a big relief, something inside me panicked at the thought that I may have thrown away my one chance to find the happiness I had been dreaming of. That selfish despair left me plagued with shame every time I thought of him, because I still saw Mark as a friend, yet felt a hollow sadness at him finding someone else. No, Mark, you definitely don't want to keep me. Maddie. His soft voice broke me from my ashen thoughts. I looked up to find Mark staring with sympathetic eyes. Look, I just wanted to say hi. Did I make this weird? Wishing I had an invisibility cloak, I shook my head, conscious of how my frizzy auburn ponytail swished against my neck. I'm just tired. I was in the kitchens all day today. My feet feel like they're on fire. His warm grin returned, and Mark threw me a wink. Making more of those amazing cupcakes? Of course he remembered my strawberry upside-down cupcakes. I'd made them for one company picnic, and Mark complimented me to no end for it. Everyone had liked them, but looking back, it left a bittersweet taste in my mouth at the way Mark had tried my cupcakes first out of all the other delicious desserts there. Homemade bread. I leaned against my car door, grateful for its support to hide my shaking hands. The cupcakes are for special occasions. Silence reigned between us, broken only the groaning wind that creaked through the distant trees. It seemed as though even the weather could see into my guilty heart and growled at me in judgment. I couldn't raise my eyes to Mark's. A sudden jolt of embarrassing memory coursing through me at the things he'd said last year, and how they hurt to think about now. You're really talented. You're coming back next year, right? You're 1 in a million, Madison Cromwell. Cool. Mark shuffled his feet and rubbed the back of his neck. Well, it was good to see you. Drive safe, Maddie. I couldn't hide my flinch this time, and realized I'd effectively shut down the conversation by not talking more. You don't have to. I mean, no, it's fine. I have to lock up the sign-in office anyway. He held up his hands in friendly disengagement, but I could sense the wounds behind Mark's expression. I'd rejected him, he'd gotten over me, and now I was ghosting him in person like some toxic social media troll. I should have just driven away. My mouth opened, though I had no idea what I was going to say since my self-hating musings blocked any constructive sentences. Boom! Mark and I both almost jumped out of our skins, and I glanced up to see the sky above royal with pitch-black clouds, flickers of lightning snaking in between. The weather hadn't called for rain, much less what looked to be a thunderstorm of seismic proportions. Inky black clouds smothered the stars. A colder, harsher breeze caught the wind, and I shivered under my green ripstop jacket. It was as if some gargantuan black beast had sprung out of nowhere and devoured the beautiful night from before. Whoa. I blurted at a few icy raindrops that began to plink down around me. Where did that come from? Mark didn't speak, and I swiveled my head to repeat my question. The question faded from my mind, and instead, I felt my skin crawl. His dark eyes were fixed on the sky, and I saw something in Mark's gaze that I'd never seen before. Deep, abysmal fear. Mark? I rasped out, wondering if I should call my dad and ask him to come get me with his big four-wheel drive truck. Mark's jaw worked, and his Adam's apple floated up and down with each nervous swallow. Which way do you usually go home? Acidic worry wriggled through my veins, and I pointed in the same direction as where the storm originated. I take High Road onto Bethesda Ridge and straight from there to 142. Don't tonight. His tone turned cold and sharp, like a man who stood face to face with something he either hated or feared. Go back to Collingswood and take 85 to the interstate. It's not safe any other way. Mark had served 6 years in the army before coming to New Wilderness, and to see him this rigid, coiled like a spring, made me temporarily forget about my internal pity party over our unfortunate past. Okay, I'll go that way. He caught my eye and placed a white-knuckled hand on the open driver's door. Do not take shortcuts, do not try to go the old route. You do not stop, not for anything or anyone. If worst comes to worst, you backtrack here and lock yourself inside the administration building. He acts like there's a tornado coming. Okay, I squeaked, unable to muster much else. Mark's sternness frightened me. I mean it, Maddie. I don't care who they are, what they do not stop, not for a soul. Period. A long bolt of silvery lightning streaked through the air, and the resounding boom that echoed off it shook the ground beneath my feet. I'd grown up in town a half hour north of the park, and had never seen a storm like this, even in tornado season. Something about how fast the clouds gobbled up the sky, the way the lightning shrieked with venomous glee, gave the storm an almost sentient quality, like it waited for us to venture out onto the long gravel roads that surrounded the isolated reserve so it could pounce. What's going on? I finally managed to meet his eyes, raw fear overpowering my facade. Mark, is everything okay? He walked around the open car door and placed both hands on my shoulders in a gentle touch that sent pangs of guilt rippling deep into my chest. Mark tried to smile, but another lightning strike lit up his thin face, and I saw the lines there, the desperation, like a man with no cards left in a losing poker game. Go home, Maddie, as fast as you can, and if you see a road sign for a Tauerpin Road spelled Tauerpin, do not take it. Do you understand me? Not really. My mind whirled with 1,000 confused questions, but the way Mark held me by my shoulders gave me a small squeeze as though we were saying goodbye forever made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. What was going on? I had never seen him get this way about a storm, and not once in the dozens of times I'd driven around New Wilderness had I ever seen a sign for Tauerpin Road. I wanted to believe Mark was messing with me, perhaps getting a form of warped revenge for my rejection. But the storm swamped the night sky above us and turned the pleasant mid-fall evening into a dark, rainy hellscape. I slid into my driver's seat and exhaled in thanks the moment my car's decrepit engine roared to life. Mark leaned through the open car window to be face level with me one last time. Remember, do not take Tauerpin Road, not for any reason. Turn around and come back if you have to. Gripping my cracked steering wheel, I forced myself to hold his gaze, even though it made my jumbled emotions do somersaults in my head. You're going to be okay, right? Through the murky darkness, that same bright smile split the night, though a morose gleam overshadowed Mark's usually cheerful eyes. I'll be fine. Text me when you get home, okay? Just so I know you're not stuck out there. With that, he jogged away to his SUV, casting furtive glances at the storm overhead, as the rain started to pour down around him. Part of me wanted to run after Mark, to hop into the passenger seat next to him and refuse to leave until he told me what was happening, but I knew I couldn't do that. Dad and Mom were waiting on me. The storm was getting worse by the second, and I didn't want to make Mark worry, nor did I want to give him any wrong ideas about my feelings toward him. Especially not now. He's finally happy, everything is back to normal, sort of. He's got some lucky girl, and I have my friend back. That's all that matters. The road home became a long, ebony ribbon of shallow potholes, which my little car rattled over one by one with a malcontent rumble. Wind roared outside my rain-streaked windows, and I could feel the power of the storm pushing my car with each heavy gust. Rivulets of water turned the windshield into an optical illusion, my vision ahead smeared and hazy, the ragged wiper blades running at full speed. All the ditches brimmed with muddy runoff water, streams flowed over the gravel roadway, and more water surged down from the surrounding banks. Thunder crackled like a war zone right over my head, and even though I sat in my nice, dry car, I still hunched over every time a boom went off in reflex, like a wild animal. Lightning bolts lit up the night sky in flashbulb eruptions, making everything seem to move in slow motion. Hump! I screamed and yanked hard on the steering wheel. All four tires skipped over the wet gravel in an uncontrolled slide, and the vehicle careened toward the nearest ditch. My heart stopped in my chest. I mashed the brake pedal to the floor, and the hunk of rouge metal ground to a stop, mere inches from flying off the road. Holy cow, I breathed, my arms and legs shaking, too stunned to be angry or afraid. A huge telephone pole lay across the road, completely blocking it, and another lay further down the tarmac in the same fashion, both fried black by the powerful lightning. Their long gray cables snaked over the wet pavement in between them, a deadly labyrinth of runaway voltage that would zap me if I tried to walk across. Not that I would even think of being that stupid. Slumping back in the seat, I closed my eyes and focused on slowing my heart rate. I'd come a few microseconds from smashing head first into the pole, and if I had, there would be no way of getting myself out of such a mess. I need to turn around. I tried to talk myself into a calmer state as the rain hammered on my tiny blue sedan, my adrenaline at all-time highs. Can't go that way. Maybe I can find a side road and... A sliver of jade green caught my eye, and the thought left my mind. On the other side of the road, a lone, dented road sign stood in the weeds and briars. Its white borders rusted, the green of the sign faded to near illegibility. But even from where I sat, there was no mistaking the words that glared back at me in the yellowish beam of my headlights. Tauerpin Road. An ice-cold shiver ran down my spine. Goosebumps scattered over my arms beneath my jacket, and I gulped back a gasp. I hadn't deviated from the route Mark had told me to take. I had followed his instructions to the letter, and I'd taken this way a few times before, always in the daytime. Never, not once, had I seen this sign. Beyond the glow of my headlights, I could discern a narrow gravel road that stretched far off into the darkness between the trees, peppered with rain so that it almost appeared jet black in the night. Unlike most of the roads in this area, this one seemed to be arrow straight, like a deep gullet of shadows that threatened to swallow me whole. Nope. I shook myself out of my stupor and reached for the gear shift knob. I'd never thought of myself as the prettiest, fastest, or even smartest girl in town, but I knew enough to stay away from sketchy areas, and this one beat them all. Blocked road or not, with the way Mark talked about it, there was no way I was taking my car down there. I'd head back, park in front of the administration building, and wait for the storm to blow over. Even if I had to be stranded at New Wilderness for the night, I figured it would be way safer than driving on roads with trees and telephone poles blown down all over the place. Clink. My bumper hit something and the back of my head smacked off my headrest. I blinked at myself in my rearview mirror with confusion. What had I hit? Nothing sat in the road behind me, no other vehicles, nothing but wet roadway, and... Seriously? My eyes stared into my mirror with disbelief. A third telephone pole draped across the road, cutting me off from my one and only escape route. It was impossible, simply impossible that lightning had struck all three in a perfect row, but there it was. I couldn't drive around it. The ground outside of the gravel road had turned to muck, and the ditches were practically medieval moats. Moving the hefty poles by myself was out of the question, and my little car didn't have the guts to drag or push them out of the way. I couldn't walk, not in this storm, with the wind bringing the temperature down to a nasty 40 degrees at minimum. Besides, my town lay another 30 miles to the north, and the road ahead was covered in downed electrical wires. Even if I tiptoed around them, I'd be stumbling along the dark road, by myself, wearing thin khaki work pants and a lightweight jacket that would never turn the rain. Flagging down a car would require one coming by, and with how bad the storm was, I didn't figure that would happen anytime soon. I pulled my phone out and tapped the screen. My heart sank at the empty triangle in the upper right-hand corner, a little X through the bottom of it. No service. Of course, I've got no service. Dad's gonna freak. Swallowing the dryness that attempted to choke me, I put the car into park and sighed. I'd just have to wait here until the storm passed. At least I had protection from the elements, and a barrier between myself and the menacing night. I could sleep till morning, run my heater, and play some music to keep boredom away. Maybe if Mark got concerned, he'd track me down and give me a ride back to New Wilderness. Come to think of it, Dad would eventually come out to search for me too, and between the two of them, there was no way they could miss me. All I had to do was sit tight and I'd be out of this jam by sunup. Satisfied with my plan, I clicked my seat back into a slight recline and started to scroll through the pictures on my phone, reliving all the fond memories I'd made this year. One by one, they glided past my gaze to reflect on the glass window beside me, a ticker tape parade of sunshine and fun. Me petting a giraffe in the giraffe barn. Me, my best friend Kendra Smith, and a few other girls washing windows at the rental cabins. Me and several others at the company picnic, where our goofy team had taken third place in a karaoke competition. Right after they gave us our trophy, Mark complimented my singing, and Kendra said I should date him, literally within earshot of the poor guy. Cringing at how the memory stabbed at my guilt-ridden heart, I reached to turn on the radio as a distraction from the uncomfortable reality of my choices. Something moved in the corner of my eye. I sat bolt upright and snapped my head around to the left. Not far away on the other side of the road stood Kendra. Her khaki pants and short brown braid were dripping, her lips tinged a shade of light blue from the horrid wind. Kendra's drenched black uniform shirt stuck to her slender frame, moving in jerky rhythm with each breath, and she hugged her arms around herself in a desperate attempt to ward off the cold. I stared, confused. How was she here? I hadn't seen any other cars pull up, no lights or horns. In fact, I couldn't see Kendra's green Kia anywhere. Had she foolishly decided to walk for help instead of staying in her own car? She must have left around the same time and got stranded too. Seeing me staring, Kendra made a sheepish smile. Kendra. I waved at her from behind the glass of my driver's door. Kendra, hop in. Come on, it's warmer in here. The rain pounded on the car roof harder, and Kendra hunched against the watery onslaught, as though each drop was an ice pick to her exposed skin. She pointed to her ear and mouthed a reply. Can't hear you. It occurred to me that, with the dull roar of the rain, there was no way she could hear me from inside my locked car, all the way across the road. Instead, I beckoned her closer, made blatant motions and half-shouted with exaggerated movements. Come here, Kendra, come here. Kendra just shook harder with a fresh gust of cold and waved for me to come to her, like she had some intimate secret she didn't want to shout in front of the lonely, dark trees. You've got to be kidding me. Whatever it is, you can tell me in the car. Ugh, I better not get pneumonia for some stupid gossip, Kendra. Frustrated, but still concerned, I slid my hand toward my door handle. Lightning peeled through the sky, and in the dark trees behind Kendra I glimpsed movement. Seconds slowed to what felt like hours, and I blinked up at the thing that hid in the forest in mute panic. It was tall, easily the same height as the surrounding pines, with a thin body that resembled a gnarled tree trunk without leaves or branches. In the spasmodic light of the storm, I couldn't see its face, just a rounded, bulbous head wreathed in shadow, and spindly arms that hung to where its knees would have risen to. My mouth fell open in shock, and I pointed a trembling finger, unable to so much as shout a warning. Kendra turned, just in time for a huge gray hand with 4 fingers to shoot out of the tree line and snatch her up like a rag doll. Her head whipped around, Kendra's mouth fell open in a terrified scream, one that I heard even inside my car. Oh no. Kendra's shriek cut off the second the massive gray arm jerked back into the trees, and another deep rumble of thunder echoed through the night, almost reminding me of throaty laughter. Kendra! My clumsy fingers fumbled with the door handle, my heart racing 1,000,000 miles a minute. Without a second thought about the cold, I lunged out the open door and snagged my foot on the loose seatbelt to fall face first in the wet gravel. Pain stung in my right palm, but I pushed myself up and dashed toward the road junction, past the battered sign for Tauerpin Road. Wind slashed at my face, pulled my hair from its ponytail, and cold rain drained down the back of my jacket with sadistic glee. Muddy gravel squelched under my tennis shoes, and shadows closed in around me as I outran the golden beams of my car's headlights. Both lungs burned with the moisture-filled air, and I squinted against the inky darkness. Wham! I flew headlong into the rough stones of the road, my shins flaring with pain. Little sharp bits of rock stuck into my bare hands, and I gritted my teeth to choke back a string of expletives. Ow, son of a... Sitting up, I picked at my hands to dislodge the pesky rocks and ran careful fingers over my legs. They were sore, but I hadn't fallen hard enough to break or sprain anything. I decided that I must have tripped over a fallen tree branch in the dark, my own hands barely visible before my dirt-smeared face. Blind as a bat in the dark, I groped for my phone. Oh, Madison, you idiot. I remembered too late that my phone sat in my car's center console, still on the picture of me and my teammates at the company picnic. 10 clammy fingers searched the pockets of my thin jacket frantically, but all I could find was the crinkled wrapper of a candy bar I'd eaten earlier today. My panic began to mount even more until my thumb bumped something smooth and cool to the touch. "Meemaw, you're the best." I chuckled and pulled out the little red pen light my grandma had gotten me for a Christmas stocking stuffer. It clicked on with a comforting bright blue glow, though the thin beam didn't let me see very far around me. Looking back the way I'd come, I spotted a downed tree branch and rubbed my shins again in spite. Man, that had hurt. Lightning illuminated the road for a split second, and it occurred to me that I couldn't see my car from where I sat. In fact, I couldn't even make out the aura of my car's headlights. It was as if they'd fallen off the face of the earth. How far did I run? I'm still on the road, and it was like 30 seconds I left it running. Maybe the battery died? But that didn't make any sense. My dad taught me enough about cars to know that if the engine was running, it should be charging the battery with the alternator. Besides, my car's battery was only a year old. I remembered paying for a new one last year. So where did the lights go? An uneasy sensation rippled through my stomach, and I rubbed at my arms for heat. All around, the trees swayed in the high wind. Lighting slithered across the sky, followed by waves of cannon-like thunder. My toes were going numb in my soggy sneakers, and I swallowed a bitter lump of regret. Whatever grabbed Kendra could be anywhere, and outside of my little car, in the pounding rain, I felt as exposed as if I had come to work naked. My mind flashed back to the little revolver my father had bought for me a month ago, one he'd insisted I carry everywhere, only for me to roll my eyes and leave it in my nightstand drawer. Dad had always been protective, particularly since I was the eldest daughter, and I'd chafed at how he'd made me text him every time I came and went from work. Sitting on the wet ground, my shins throbbing, with nothing but my tiny pen light to ward off the darkness, I cursed myself for all the times I'd shrugged him off as being too paranoid. Dad, I wish you were here. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I spun around at the sound of shoes on loose stones, and the beam of my flashlight landed on a familiar khaki-wearing figure. Shocked, I stood up. Kendra? She stopped several yards away, far enough that the weak beam of my pen light couldn't fully reveal her features. Something in the pit of my guts churned, like I'd eaten spoiled food, and I took a cautious step forward. Kendra? Geez, you okay? I saw that thing grab you. What was... My limbs froze, and the words died in my throat at a sudden realization. Every morning I checked the work roster to see where I'd be working and who I'd be working with. Mainly, I wanted to know ahead of time if I was working with any newcomers so I could know their names. But ever since the incident with Mark, I also did it to be sure I had fair warning if he'd be anywhere nearby. Kendra and I were really close, and she always texted me whenever we were set to work together, usually a long string of happy emojis. I was certain she hadn't been on the roster at all today. My heart thudded against my ribs and both hands turned slick with sweat. In the faint glow of my light, I could just begin to make out the contours of Kendra's pale face. She was smiling, wide, far too wide. I took a step back. Kendra lunged forward, letting out a croaking screech that rang in my ears. Reacting too slow, I raised my arms to protect myself and locked eyes with her. Kendra's eyes were a flood of off-white, as if they'd rolled into the back of her head, and her mouth hung open in a gape that couldn't be normal for how wide it was. Her teeth were squared off and stubby, almost like they'd been carved in some weird woodcraft festival, and yet she grinned in a stiff way that made my blood run cold. Like a rabid dog, she hurled herself into me and we both went flying to the ground. I would have screamed, but the blow knocked the wind out of me, Kendra straddling my chest and pinning me with her weight. Desperate to escape, I squirmed to prevent her manic fingers from reaching my face as she seemed intent on clawing my eyes out. Her skin was cold as ice and surprisingly hard, dense like a chair leg. My feeble jabs didn't seem to have any impact, and it felt like I was punching a wall. All the while, Kendra's bizarre jaws snapped inches from my face, her fetid breath blasting me with the stench of rot. She grabbed both my wrists with her vice-like grip, and I felt my energy slipping away, my strength gone, sapped by unforgiving fear. No, no, no. Gaining the upper hand, she held down my arms, and I couldn't stop the panic, sobbing and writhing in the mud. Something in the way Kendra grinned at me in malicious, animalistic joy told me that my fate would not only be painful but slow, and that death should be the least of my worries. My mind flashed to my dad's smile, my mom's warm hugs, to my sister and brother, and my own cozy room covered in movie posters and Skyrim art. I wanted nothing more than to see them again, to get back in my car and drive home, to wake up from this horrible nightmare I'd somehow fallen into. In the last few moments, I pictured Mark's soft brown eyes, his debonair smile, and the way he'd warned me with fear heavy in his voice. "Text me when you get home, okay?" I squeezed my eyes shut and turned my face to the muck as Kendra's lukewarm breath hissed in my ear, ready for her to rip into me like a juicy steak. Whack! The crack of wood on wood pierced the air above my face, and Kendra wrenched backward, something coarse and wet spattering over my face. At last I screamed, still paralyzed by fear, afraid to open my eyes. Kendra's bulk slid off me, and more footsteps bounded up next to my head. A few more loud cracks echoed, as if a 2x4 had been smashed against a wall repeatedly. Something grabbed the back of my jacket collar and started to pull me down the road, oblivious to my frightened hyperventilation. Thunder roared, and even through my closed eyelids, I could see a monstrous shadow framed against the bright lightning nearby, standing over the road. It's got me. My arms came back to life, and I thrashed, kicked, and screamed with all my might, like my mother had told me to do if someone ever tried to drag me into their van. I wanted to go home, wanted to live, and even if it meant biting and clawing my way out, I would do it. Whatever had hold of my jacket let go, and my eyes flew open so I could make a run for it. Stop. A hand clamped over my mouth, while an arm wound around my chest to yank me off the road and deep into the murky brush. "You want to get us both killed?" Wait, what? Both legs went limp the instant that voice jerked me from my panic. Could it be? "Marm," I murmured into the calloused hand over my mouth. My captor tensed, and more whispered words tickled my right ear. "Stay still. It's close." I didn't have time to protest. On the opposite side of the road, a tall, lumbering figure moved through the trees in long, slow strides, its head swaying slowly back and forth, as if searching for something. Each step the being took made the ground shake, small tremors moving up from the mud into my chest as if a steel mill were right beside me. One hand swung freely at its side, like a person out for a walk, while the other held onto a long mass of what looked like black strands draped over its pebble-gray shoulder, attached to a load that I couldn't see from where I sat. I still couldn't make out its face, so high up and shrouded in darkness was it, and while it had arms, legs, and a body like a person, I somehow knew in the depths of my frightened mind that this thing was far from natural. The massive creature wandered on down the road, letting out long, loud bellows at random intervals that sounded kind of like beluga whale calls, the eerie siren song making my head swim. As soon as it trailed out of sight, a dark form shifted in from above me, and a newfound panic rose in my throat at the shove of someone pushing me hard against a rock so I couldn't wriggle free. Red light filled my field of vision, and I slammed my eyes shut in confusion at the glow that hovered over my face. The hand left my mouth at last, only to return with the cold sensation of a knife blade pressed to my neck. Again, a low voice hissed through the dark. Say your name. What did I do? I don't understand. What did I do to deserve this? I choked down a whimper and tried to stay calm. Please, I said, say your name. The shadow with Mark's voice snarled in a vicious tone I'd never heard him take with anyone before. My skin prickled, and I had never felt more helpless than in that moment. I had always trusted Mark, and never in my wildest nightmares would I have thought of him hurting me. Now I was at his mercy, and I thought with bitter remorse of my rejection, and how he might seek vengeance for it. Madison, I squeaked, praying it was really him, and that somehow he'd let me go. Mark, please don't. What kind of cupcakes do you make? The knife didn't move, and I felt it brush my skin as I swallowed nervously. Strawberry upside down. There was a long, terrifying pause. The knife left my throat, and the figure pulled me up from the cold rock he had me pinned to. 2 arms wove around me and held me close, so close that I could smell the mint aftershave on his neck and burned cordite on his gray jacket. He tucked the open folds of his coat around my shoulders to surround me in warmth, his dry uniform shirt soaking up some of the rainwater from mine. The harshness vanished like melted snow, and a tenderness radiated through his embrace that made everything seem a little less dark. What are you doing here, Maddie? At the sound of my name, I wound my hands up in the cloth of Mark's shirt and pressed my face to his collar in relief. My car. I got stuck. Kendra. Yeah, I know. Mark rubbed my back between both tense shoulder blades, his touch comforting. It wasn't her. With my face buried into his cozy jacket lapels, I fought tears that brimmed in my eyes, too afraid to be embarrassed. What's going on? Another roll of thunder growled overhead, and somewhere off in the woods a shriek echoed into the night. We have to go. Mark slid his arms under my armpits and hauled me to my feet. It's not safe here. But I clung to him, refused to let go, too cold and scared to leave the heated sanctuary of his coat. What's going on, Mark? What was that thing? Why did she... Mark clicked his flashlight on and held it so I could see his face. In the red beam, Mark's brown eyes appeared black, his face grim, and there were scratches on his right cheek as if someone had dug their fingernails into his skin. Maddie, I need you to trust me, all right? I'll explain once we have some breathing room. Now come on. Every instinct I had wanted to refuse, to beg him to run with me back to my waiting car. So I speed home to my warm house. I just wanted this nightmare to end, yet something primal inside my guts told me that I wouldn't get 10 feet without Mark. Like it or not, I needed him, and he seemed bound and determined to plunge deeper into the forests surrounding that cursed road. Another cold gust of wind raked its cruel tendrils over my face, and I shivered. Okay. Mark grabbed my hand, and without a word, led me deeper into the darkness. My shoes slid on the mud, thorns stuck into my thin coat, and the rain continued to sap me of whatever body heat I had left. Still, I never let go of his hand, for fear this strange labyrinth would swallow him like it had my old beater and leave me at the mercy of whatever other apparitions were out there. My fate was sealed now, my survival entwined with Mark's, and I followed him blindly through the abyss, hoping with every step that he had some plan to get me out of Tauerpin Road.